It all started on a Wednesday, nothing special about the day itself, but what happened that afternoon changed everything. If you'd asked me back then, I would have told you I had a perfect life. A stable marriage, a good job, and the kind of routine that made me feel safe. But what I didn't realize was how quickly comfort can turn into temptation, and how temptation can destroy everything you thought was solid. Her name was Claire. She wasn't just a teacher, she was my teacher during a night class I'd started taking to build new skills and maybe spark something different in my life. My wife had encouraged it, actually. Said it was good that I was trying to grow, that maybe we'd even grow together. But the truth is, I was already drifting. We both were. Our conversations had become shallow, the spark had faded, and I was craving connection in a way I didn't even fully understand. And Claire, she noticed. She was sharp, confident, the kind of person who made you feel like you mattered when she spoke to you. It started innocently, of course. A few late conversations after class, shared stories about books and life. At first, I told myself it was harmless. That I just admired her. But the way my heart would race when I saw her walk into the room? The way her laughter lingered in my head hours after I left class? Deep down, I knew I was in trouble. I kept telling myself I was in control. That I could draw the line when I needed to. But that's the thing about emotional affairs, they don't start with physical boundaries. They start with secrets. With texts I deleted before my wife could see them. With little lies like, class went long tonight, when really, we were sitting in Claire's car, talking about everything and nothing until midnight. I told myself I was just escaping the dullness at home. That I wasn't doing anything wrong. But eventually, those boundaries broke. The night it happened, I wish I could say I didn't see it coming. But I did. I just didn't stop it. And from that moment on, everything unraveled. I started avoiding home. My guilt turned into defensiveness, and the person I once loved became a stranger. My wife knew. Maybe not all the details, but she knew something had shifted. You can't hide that kind of distance for long. When it finally came out, when she saw the messages I forgot to delete, I didn't even try to deny it. The look on her face will haunt me for the rest of my life. It wasn't just anger. It was betrayal. It was the kind of pain that makes you realize some mistakes can't be fixed. And yet, this story isn't as simple as villain and victim. There's more to what led me here, more than just one bad decision. It's about loneliness, unmet needs, and the lies we tell ourselves to survive. But the worst part? I still don't know if I regret it. That's where this story really begins. Back when my wife and I first met, things felt easy. We were both young, chasing dreams, full of hope and energy. She was always the calm one, organized, practical, the kind of person who kept everything steady. And I needed that. I was more of the scattered type, bouncing between ideas and passions, never fully settling into anything. We balanced each other out for a while. But slowly, life got heavier. The routine started to feel more like traps than comfort, and we slipped into this silent agreement to just go through the motions. We stopped laughing the way we used to. Dinners became quiet. We slept back to back. There wasn't a big fight or some dramatic fallout, it was just a slow fade. I told myself it was normal. That this is what marriage becomes after a few years. But still, something inside me kept aching for more. Not necessarily more passion, or more excitement, just more feeling. I wanted to feel seen again. That's where Claire came in. She wasn't trying to be anything more than a teacher. At least, that's how it looked in the beginning. But it was the way she paid attention that got to me. She asked questions about my life and actually waited for the answers. She remembered little things I said the week before. She made me feel like I mattered, not because I was her student, but because she seemed genuinely curious about who I was. I'd stay after class just to hear her talk about books, or her travels, or her opinions on life. It was also different from the quiet space I came home to. With Claire, I could be that version of myself I thought I'd lost. The one who used to dream, who used to create, who used to believe in things. And maybe that's why I let it go too far, because she didn't see the version of me that felt like a failure. She saw the version I missed. There were moments when I'd look at my wife, asleep on the couch after a long day, and feel this crushing guilt. She didn't deserve any of it. She trusted me. And yet, I couldn't stop. Every time I thought about cutting things off, Claire would say something, or just look at me in that way, and suddenly the world at home felt even smaller. I was living two lives. And each one was slowly starting to crack. Claire never asked me to choose. That was part of the problem. She kept everything casual, open-ended. No pressure, no big talks about the future. Just stolen moments, late-night conversations, and that feeling like time stopped when we were alone. It gave me room to pretend I still had control. I told myself I could keep both worlds separate, be a husband at home, and someone else entirely with her. But the more I tried to live both lives, the more they started to blur. And I knew, deep down, it couldn't last. Things at home got colder. My wife started noticing the shift, how distracted I was, how short my temper had become. She'd ask if something was wrong, if work was stressing me out, and I'd always give the same excuse. Just tired, I'd say. But I could see it in her eyes, she wasn't buying it anymore. She wasn't angry yet. Just confused. Hurt. Still trying to hold on to the version of me she thought she knew. Meanwhile, with Claire, the lines started to move. What began as late talks in her car turned into quiet evenings in her apartment. I'd tell myself it was the last time. That I needed to end it. But then I'd hear her laugh, or she'd say something that made me feel understood in a way I hadn't felt in years, and all my promises to myself would disappear. There was also guilt creeping in from places I didn't expect. One night, my wife made dinner from scratch, something she rarely had time to do anymore, and she was so proud of it. I sat there, pretending to enjoy the meal, nodding at her stories, while inside, I felt like I was sinking. I kept wondering, who was I becoming? How did I get here? It wasn't just about cheating. That word doesn't capture everything. It was about lying to someone who believed in me. It was about losing myself in the attention of someone who didn't carry the weight of our shared past. And in the middle of it all, there was this fear I couldn't shake: what if neither of these versions of my life were real anymore? And then came the text. Not from Claire, but from my wife. Just one line. We need to talk. That's when I knew the walls were finally closing in. I stared at her message for a long time. We need to talk. Just 4 words, but they hit like a punch to the chest. I knew exactly what it meant. It wasn't a question, and it wasn't casual. It was the kind of message that only comes when someone's seen something they can't unsee. My mind raced. Had she found the messages? Was it something I said in my sleep? Had I left some small clue behind? I tried to play it cool, replying with a simple, "Sure, what's up?" But her silence after that reply only made it worse. That entire day felt like walking on a minefield. Every little sound made me jump. I kept checking my phone, waiting for her to respond again, to give some hint, some context, anything. But nothing came. Just silence. And silence, in moments like that, feels louder than words. When I got home that night, the house was quiet. Not just the normal kind of quiet, but the kind that makes you pause at the front door before stepping in. I walked into the kitchen and saw her sitting there, not looking at me. Her face was calm, too calm. There was a manila folder on the table, and my heart dropped. She didn't speak right away. Just looked at me, and that look. I'll never forget it. It wasn't angry. It wasn't sad. It was empty. She slowly pushed the folder toward me. Inside were printed screenshots, texts between me and Claire, dates and times, things I'd written that I barely remembered saying. I didn't even try to explain. I couldn't. The proof was right there. But what tore me apart was that she had clearly waited. She had collected everything, stayed silent, watched me lie to her over and over again. And still, she let me walk through the door that night like nothing had changed. That's a different kind of pain, knowing someone loved you enough to wait for the truth, even when it hurt. Then she spoke, finally. Just one question, why? And I had no answer. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My thoughts were a mess, too many truths and lies tangled together. That one word hung in the air, heavy, echoing in my head. I could feel everything collapsing in that moment. The marriage, the trust, the person I used to be. And all I could do was stand there, frozen, watching the life I built start to fall apart, piece by piece. She didn't cry. That was the part that broke me most. My wife just sat there, looking at me like I was someone she'd never met. I think I would have felt better if she yelled, threw something, anything. But the silence after she asked why was louder than any scream. I couldn't speak, because I didn't know where to begin. Everything I wanted to say felt hollow, like I was just trying to save face. And deep down, I knew I didn't deserve to be saved. I expected her to leave. That night, or maybe the next day. I expected the locks to change, bags packed, divorce papers on the table. But she didn't leave. She stayed. Not because she forgave me, but because she had something else to say. And what she said next flipped everything upside down. I already knew. For weeks, she said, quietly. But I didn't say anything because I've been seeing someone too. It was like the ground dropped out from under me. At first, I thought she was just saying it to hurt me. But then she pulled out her phone and showed me. Messages. Photos. Conversations. All of it. She'd been confiding in someone from her office, a guy I barely noticed the few times we'd crossed paths. He wasn't just a friend. He'd been there for her while I was disappearing into Claire's world. While I was too distracted, too selfish, too blind to see she had been hurting too. I didn't know what to feel. Shock? Anger? Guilt? I stood there, staring at the screen in her hand, realizing we were both living lies under the same roof. And the worst part? I couldn't even blame her. I had no right. She had found comfort somewhere else because I had already abandoned her emotionally, long before things with Claire ever crossed the line. The air between us changed in that moment. What started as betrayal had now become something else, something colder. Mutual destruction. We were both broken in different ways, both carrying secrets, both wearing fake smiles around each other for far too long. And now it was all out in the open. No more pretending. No more hiding. But instead of ending it right there, she looked me straight in the eyes and said, "We're going to act like none of this happened. At least for now." I was stunned. "What do you mean?" "I mean we're going to go on like we're still okay. Family events. Work parties. Dinners. We fake it. Because if we tear it apart now, it's going to get ugly. And I'm not ready for ugly." That's when I realized this story wasn't just about infidelity. It was about power. About silence. About two people trying to control a collapsing world in their own ways. And suddenly, I wasn't sure who the villain was anymore. And that's when Claire messaged me. 4 words, just like my wife's. "I think I'm pregnant." I read Claire's message over and over, not believing what I was seeing. "I think I'm pregnant." My mind went completely blank. Everything around me blurred, my wife in the other room, the sound of the clock ticking, the weight of what she had just told me. The walls that were already crumbling just fell even faster. My first instinct wasn't excitement. It wasn't fear either. It was panic. I didn't respond right away. I couldn't. What was I even supposed to say? My marriage was a mess. My wife had just confessed she'd been unfaithful too. We were both pretending to hold it together for reasons neither of us really believed in anymore. And now, Claire, this woman who had become my escape, my secret, was telling me there might be a baby involved. A child. Something real. Something permanent. That night, I didn't sleep. I laid there in bed next to my wife, both of us wide awake but not speaking. Just breathing in the same space, lost in our own thoughts. The silence was thick, heavy. And all I kept wondering was, what happens now? The next morning, I met Claire at a small cafe far from the neighborhood. She looked pale, anxious, and not at all like the confident woman I had once been drawn to. She handed me a pregnancy test in a plastic bag, her hands shaking a little. "I haven't been to a doctor yet," she said quietly. "I just needed to tell you." I stared at the test, the little plus sign staring back at me like some cruel joke. "Are you sure it's mine?" The words came out before I could stop them, and I hated myself for saying them, but I had to ask. She just gave me a tired, broken look. "There's no one else." I knew then that everything had changed. There was no going back to the life I had before. No faking it at family dinners. No quiet nights pretending the truth wasn't crawling under our skin. I had destroyed my marriage. Claire and I had crossed every line. And now, this child was the consequence. I came home that evening and told my wife everything. I didn't soften it. I didn't try to hide. I told her about the pregnancy, the meeting with Claire, and how I didn't know what came next. I expected her to finally break, to scream, to throw me out. But she didn't. She just nodded slowly, eyes glassy. Then she said something I never expected, I already knew. "Claire messaged me, too." My heart sank. "What?" "She messaged me. Last week. I was just waiting to see if you'd tell me yourself." I stood there, stunned, every word hitting me harder than the last. And then she delivered the final twist. "I had a pregnancy scare last month too. But it wasn't yours. And it wasn't his either. Because I was done with both of you a long time ago." She walked past me, calm and steady, and said, "This marriage is over. But you're going to have to raise the consequences of your own lies. I'm finally free." She didn't slam the door. She didn't shout. She just walked away. That was the part that stayed with me, the quiet end to what once was a life we built together. I stood there, still trying to process her final words. She had already let go long before I even realized we were falling apart. And now, there was nothing left to save. After she left, the house felt hollow. Every room was filled with echoes of a life I'd taken for granted. The small routines, the inside jokes, the quiet Sunday mornings, all gone. I kept looking at the couch where we used to sit, the photos we hadn't taken down yet, and realized how quickly it can all vanish when you stop paying attention. Claire and I talked again, but things were different now. The fantasy had disappeared. We were just two people facing something real, something permanent. She went to the doctor and confirmed the pregnancy. She didn't ask me for promises or talk about a future together. She simply told me she would keep the baby, and that she didn't expect anything from me, at least not yet. But I knew I couldn't walk away this time. I had caused this. I had to face it. The weeks that followed were slow and painful. My wife officially filed for divorce. It was cleaner than I expected, no fighting over property, no screaming matches. Just signatures and silence. The kind that comes when two people already know there's nothing left to fix. I didn't fight her on anything. How could I? I had broken the trust first. And maybe, in her own way, she had only followed the cracks I left behind. I started therapy. Something I should have done years ago. That's where I began to unpack it all, the emotional distance, the choices, the need for validation I kept chasing in all the wrong places. I talked about my guilt, my fear, and my regret. But I also talked about the child who would soon be here. The part of this mess that wasn't a mistake. A child doesn't deserve to be born into shame. So I started preparing. Slowly. Stepping up where I could. Showing up when I said I would. Not for Claire. Not to win her back. But for the baby. My wife never looked back. She moved on quietly, and from what I hear, she's doing okay. Happier, lighter. And honestly, she deserves that. Maybe we both do, in different ways. But now, I live with the weight of what I lost, and the responsibility of what I created. If there's anything I've learned through all of this, it's that love isn't just about what you feel. It's about what you do when it matters most. And when you take people for granted, when you ignore the slow unraveling of connection, it catches up to you. This story isn't about villains. It's about choices. About two people who forgot how to hold on to each other. And one life-altering consequence that reminded me what it means to show up, even if it's too late to fix the past. 7.